Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Know Thy Enemy, presented by the Right Way Sports Network. As always, we will be taking a look at the Bengals' upcoming opponent. This time, it is the Denver Broncos, as the Bengals travel to the Mile High Stadium to hopefully right the ship. That's going to be easier said than done against a Broncos team that has a fair number of very talented players who are playing well right now. Some vulnerabilities that we will talk about. But first, as always, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and always tune in to State of the Jungle on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. But without further ado, let's talk about this Broncos team that the Bengals will be taking on. Overall, the offensive numbers are not impressive outright. Just 21st in EPA per play, 28th in success rate, 21st in dropback EPA, and 16th in rush EPA. However, that can be kind of really deceiving. There's been a lot of almost plays for the Broncos. Marvin Mims has had a couple of big almost plays as well. Consistency has been a problem with the Broncos, kind of penalties, early negative plays, setting them up in long situations that have led to some of the 3-and-outs and just inconsistent ability to sustain drives that I think is maybe not quite as reflective of the true potential and nature of this Broncos team. I believe they're fairly close to just figuring out and hitting some more of these plays, not to the point where they're, suddenly a top 10 offense, but at least closer to somewhere in that 15 range, because they have talented offensive linemen. They have a good stable of running backs, and you have a good offensive mind in Sean Payton, as well as a capable quarterback in Bo Nix. If unspectacular, it's still very capable and a threat to run if he gets that open field opportunity. With that, you can win a lot of games, especially behind a talented defense. So the Broncos are definitely a team that you would be foolish to kind of take lightly, as they do have a lot of talented offensive weapons. Just talking about more about Bo Nix and how he himself has struggled early this season. Mechanics have been a little inconsistent at times, just a little off on the delivery, not quite doing the things like climbing the pocket and setting his feet before he throws, just getting away, kind of jumping or leaping, or just not having a sound base that's leading to some of the accuracy issues and some of the just near misses that we talked about. Overall, 26th in EPA per drop back and 31st in drop back success rate this season. 24th in completion percentage over expectation, just below completion percentage of expectation by 2%, and 29th of 29 quarterbacks in PFF grade. He has the 4th highest turnover worthy play percentage, and he's averaging just 5.6 yards per attempt. So that kind of illustrates a little bit of the results of his struggles. Again, I think if he settles in on his mechanics a little bit, you kind of parse out some of these happenstance plays that are, just almost had that. They really needed to connect on that, or not getting these early negatives on first down and second down that make third down that much harder for a guy like Bo Nix, to where you don't have to rely on him to do traditional deep drop back pocket passing. You can trust him to do more of your simplified reads, getting the ball to your talented playmakers and letting them work. Speaking of those talented playmakers who the Bengals fans need to be on the watch for, obviously, Courtland Sutton, who is still an extremely talented receiver, still a threat to go long at any point, averaging an astounding 14.2 yards per reception. Then we had a little bit of a down season. The production is more related to Bo Nix than anything with Courtland Sutton, excuse me. He is still just an awesome receiver. Very fun to watch play. Will be exciting to see what he does this weekend. Another exciting ad is Troy Franklin, someone that many Bengals fans were familiar with coming out of the NFL draft just a season ago. 6.1 yards after the catch per reception, which is 7th among receivers this season. Very impressive numbers, something that the Broncos can absolutely use in their offense. Lots of targets week 1 and 2. Wasn't very involved last week versus the Chargers. We'll be curious to see kind of how that balance plays out between Sutton, Franklin, and a guy like Marvin Mims. I think there's going to be opportunities to take advantage of this Bengals secondary and this Bengals defense. Which one of those receivers ends up having the big day is really the question. Marvin Mims has been a couple just almost fingertips away from having a big day. Troy Franklin, obviously that threat after the catch, and Courtland Sutton, a threat to go off at any point. So we'll be very interested to see which of those guys steps up against the Bengals secondary. Looking at the offensive line, Garrett Bowles at tackle has the #1 PFF pass block grade among all offensive linemen this season. Very impressive. At the other tackle spot, you've got Mike McGlinchey, who, as always, has been very solid. Guard on the interior, Quinn Miners, has actually been really impressive, 11th among all guards in pass block grade this season, and Ben Powers opposite him is 18th out of 61 guards. So very strong, this offensive line unit. Luke Wattenberg, the center, may be the weakest link of a very strong unit, but he still just allowed 2 pressures. So there's not necessarily going to be a weak link to this system. The Bengals defensive line is going to have to earn all of the pressures that they do get this week. It's not going to get easier than it did against the Minnesota offensive line, which has been hampered by injuries last week. And that still was not good enough, unfortunately, even though it was an admirable effort compared to what we expect generally from the Bengals defense. Obviously, the running back room, very talented for the Broncos. You have J.K. Dobbins, you have Harvey back there, you have 𝗙𝗪𝗏𝗪, I believe is the pronunciation they're going for nowadays, but very uninvolved, was only in there for pass blocking and kind of trust in him more than RJ Harvey. But I know he struggled in the limited action he did get last week. I'll be very interested to see if the very explosive RJ Harvey starts to get a little bit more involved in the offense, if that, the way that the Bengals trust 𝗙𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏, if suddenly he stopped pass blocking well, you might see more Taj Brooks. I think we see more of that with RJ Harvey. Flipping sides to the Broncos defense, who has actually been really good this season. Shocker. 7th in EPA per play so far, 4th in success rate, 9th in drop back EPA, and 10th in rush EPA. Led in the pass rush department by a very talented edge, Nik Bonitto. He is currently tied 8th overall in pass rush grade. And when you look at pass rush productivity, which takes pressures and sacks, gives the appropriate weighting toward sacks, because ultimately that is the goal and the more valuable stat to achieve, Nik Bonitto becomes #1 among edges. Very talented player, and it doesn't get any easier for the Bengals offensive line opposite him, where you have Jonathan Cooper, who's 21st out of 61 edge defenders in pass rush grade. And when we go look at pass rush productivity and factor in the value for sacks, he becomes the 4th highest graded edge in pass rush productivity. So very productive edge tandem here. It's going to be a rough week for the Bengals offensive line if Orlando Brown plays at the same level as he did last week. If offensive linemen on the interior are forgetting who they need to block on a given down, it's going to be a long day for the Bengals offensive line for sure. Riley Moss, we all know Patrick Surtain, very, very talented corner. Don't need to go too much more into it than that. Teams are often not looking his way and looking instead the way of Riley Moss opposite him, who currently is 2nd most in the NFL in targets with 28. However, he is 11th among 78 defensive backs in catch percentage allowed. So even though he is being targeted a lot, he is not allowing a high percentage of completions his direction. So credit to him. Another kind of mid-late round guy that a lot of Bengals fans are familiar with during draft time, if you were involved in the draft process. And then rounding out that secondary along with Surtain and with Moss is Talanoa Hufanga from the 49ers, who, since signing with the Broncos, has been one of the best run defending safeties this season. He's got 4 defensive stops and an 83.2 run defense grade, which ranks 5th among safeties. So you're not going to find necessarily a lot of weak spots in that secondary to attack either. This has been a very successful defense. Yes, they played the Titans, which could help, but they've also played a very talented Chargers team and a very talented Colts team, who has been one of the most consistent offenses, surprisingly, in the NFL this season. So even against very talented offenses, the defense for the Broncos has still stepped up. I expect that to be the case at home when the Broncos take them on Monday night. With that in mind, how do the Bengals take away a victory from the Denver Broncos on the road. Tough ask. Very tough ask. First is you got to cut down on the turnovers. I think you've got 8 turnovers in 2 games, 7 quarters basically, with Jake Browning kind of manning the helm, and those are not all his fault. When you talk about a backup quarterback coming in and how you walk away with a victory, it's by taking care of the football, executing, and letting your defense compensate and letting your playmakers compensate. If you're turning the ball over 2, 3, 4, 5 times a game, you're not going to win. That's tough to win with Joe Burrow. It's especially tough to win with Jake Browning. So limit the turnovers on offense. Average more than 2.5 yards per carry. Yes, I'm setting the bar very, very low, but we're trying to take into account what we're dealing with here. So have a semblance of a run game that has to be respected a little bit so the play action game works a little bit better. Then on defense, you got to find a way to get pressure on Bo Nix. Again, much like Joe Flacco, much like other quarterbacks that the Bengals have played this season, you are going to have the opportunity for these turnover-worthy plays. It's the only way you're going to be able to compensate for a defense that gives up a touchdown on 65% of their red zone opportunities. That's not going to cut it. You got to keep teams out of the red zone, or you're going to have to keep them from scoring. You're going to have to get these turnovers. So that's going to be really important in kind of trying to tip the scales in the Bengals' favor, so to speak. Offense is going to need that. This Denver defense is serious. It's going to be a very big game, prime time on the road. They're going to be bringing their A game. The Bengals absolutely need to as well if they want to walk out with a victory. Thank you as always for tuning in to Know Thy Enemy. Had a great time breaking down this Broncos team. Very talented offense and defense here. It's going to be a fun Monday night fest here. As always, 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗡. Don't forget to tune in next week. We'll catch you next time.
This is TWSN. You ain't heard about us yet, well, you better know now, because it's the place that it all goes down.